Update. I found out the actual reason my mom lost custody of me, and I don't know if I can ever look at her again. Original post. I was removed from my mother's care by DCFS when I was 11 years old due to allegations of SA post against my stepfather. He was convicted by those crimes, but took a plea deal which meant he'd be out by the time I was 13. And from what I can remember, I don't even know that he served those 2 full years anyway. I was his primary victim. I don't remember how old I was when it started, but the earliest he admitted to was when I was 8. I don't know if my mom knew before DCFS got involved or if she found out afterwards, but now I don't think it would have mattered to her if she was aware. After being put into temporary custody of the state while the legal issues were sorted out, eventually I was placed with a relative and her husband, who later adopted me when it was clear my mother wouldn't be getting me back. My adoptive parents put me in therapy, got me the help I needed, did everything they could to make me feel safe again. Something they never prevented me from was speaking to my mother. I was always able to call or text her, and she was always allowed to come visit me, but I could never go and see her. I didn't really question it as a kid. I assumed it was some stipulation the courts made. I believed growing up that the reason my mom hadn't gotten me back was because of neglect, I guess. I assumed that the court thought it was partly her fault that I had been left unattended with that man so often, or that it took someone else noticing I was physically injured for something to be done about it. My adoptive parents never challenged these assumptions I had, and they always told me that they would never stop me from having a relationship with my mom, so long as that's what I wanted. Once I turned 18, my mom and I started talking more frequently, but we didn't see each other in person often. I never really thought much of it at first, but as the years went by, I started questioning the circumstances of my removal and subsequent adoption. I was confused as to why a woman with no prior issues with the law would have had her child taken from her in such a cut and dry way. I decided to ask my adoptive parents about it, and they very gently informed me that my mother was told that in order for her to regain custody of me, her husband, my abuser, would be required to leave the home and could not under any circumstances come near me. Not only because he was an offender, but because I was the victim. My mother evidently could not meet these conditions, and so I was adopted by my relatives. When I worked up the courage to ask my mom if it was true, she didn't deny it. She told me she loved him, that he was a good man who made a mistake. They said that she could have her daughter or she could stay with her husband, and she chose him. She picked him over me. I don't even know what to do with the things I'm feeling now. I feel sick just thinking about it. She's my mother, and she knew what he did. He was convicted of sexually abusing her 11-year-old child, and she refused to leave him. For the past 12 years, she has willingly slept in a bed next to the man that assaulted her daughter. She has stayed married to the man who hurt me. My adoptive parents said they were advised by the therapist to let me figure it out in my own time, as my mother, despite picking that man over me, never made any move to have me near him again. She just wasn't willing to make him leave so that I could be with her. Evidently, the therapist thought it would be more detrimental in the long run to keep me from communicating with my mother entirely. None of that makes me feel better. The past few days have felt like a nightmare. I don't understand how she could stay with him. I don't understand why she chose a monster over her child. I'm trying to understand why my adoptive parents didn't tell me, but to be honest, I don't really understand their reasoning either. My mom has been texting me, but I haven't answered. I can't even think about her without feeling nauseous, or so angry I want to cry, or both. My adoptive parents keep checking in on me, but I've only answered the phone for them because I don't want them to drive here out of concern. I really don't even know what to do anymore. Now for the top comments before reading the update. Your adoptive parents consulted with medical professionals on how to deal with this. They took that advice because they didn't want to cause you more harm and because they love you. They were putting you first because you were their priority over their own feelings. How do I know that? Because I had a family member in a similar situation. It ripped them to pieces every time their child had contact with a parent that refused to protect them, knowing that child was being harmed repeatedly. Everything your adoptive parents did, they did it out of love for you, no matter how hard it was on them. I will be honest, I don't understand people like your mother. Children should be protected at all costs. At the very least, you need time and distance from her. You may be able to forgive her, but don't trust her. If it were me, that relationship would be over. If you're not in counseling still, then please find counseling. This is a horrendous thing to deal with, and just too hard for a person to do on their own. Sending good thoughts and wishes for your healing. Thank you. I really appreciate this perspective. I know they made choices for me based on what they thought would help me most in the end. This is just such an, I don't know, insane thing to try and process. I feel like I'm kind of losing it. I don't understand my mother either. I don't know how she's able to sleep at night knowing the things that man did. I can't wrap my mind around it. I do have a therapy appointment coming up soon, and related to this specific part of my situation, so I'm going to have professional help in dealing with this. I'm just feeling really lost and overwhelmed right now. One of the most disturbing things is that your mom calls her husband sexually assaulting you for years since you were 8 years old a mistake. Her husband made a mistake, and that's a profound level of delusional belief because it was his decision to violate you for years and only stopped because the authorities were involved. The crime is not a mistake, it's a planned, premeditated decision. I haven't been able to stop thinking about that part. The way she called it a mistake said that he is a good man. She dismissed it as though he didn't make a conscious choice to go into my bedroom every night for 3+ years, like it was an accident or somehow unintentional. The good man she's married to is a predator who will be on the registry for the rest of his life for the things he did to me. I assumed my mother would have loved me enough to at least acknowledge the severity of what my stepfather had done. Evidently, I was wrong. Are you mad at your adoptive parents for not letting you know you were sexually assaulted? What would you have preferred they do instead? As far as your mom, don't talk to her again because she clearly doesn't love you. I'm not mad at my parents. I'm just having a hard time processing their choice not to tell me my mother remained married to my abuser all these years. I've spent all this time trying to connect with her in some way. But if I had known that she had chosen over a decade ago to stay with a predator instead of get me back, I think I would have cut my losses much sooner. I don't really know how I feel about it right now, but I'm not really mad at them. I know they did their best. Also, they didn't have to inform me that I was abused. Believe me, I am very aware. Now for the update. I guess I wanted to write a little bit of an update. I didn't expect so many people to see the post. Honestly, I just needed to vent, and I didn't want to dump any of that on my friends or family. I had a therapy session earlier in the week, so I was able to bring this revelation up to my therapist, and we're going to work on ways to help me process this. That's obviously something that's going to take time, but I'm sure eventually I'll find a way to live with it. Right now, I still don't know how to unpack any of the feelings I have about this. I do understand why my adoptive parents went about it the way they did. In the moment, being given that information was just a lot to comprehend and deal with, and I felt betrayed. Not necessarily by them, but I think I did put some of those feelings onto them. That wasn't really fair, and I did try to apologize, but they aren't upset with me for it. They told me they felt I didn't have anything to be sorry for. They know firsthand how difficult this is for me, and they told me they were already expecting the reaction I had. My adoptive mom said that if she had been in my shoes, she would have been upset too, even if that feeling wasn't entirely directed at the right people. I did speak to them about how I felt and ask if they could tell me a little more about why they decided to handle it the way they did. They said that when they got custody of me and saw all the ways the trauma from my early childhood manifested, they wanted to do everything they could to make sure I would be able to grow up as cared for and well-adjusted as possible. When the therapist encouraged them not to tell me the truth or challenge my belief that I'd been removed from my mom because of neglect, they followed that advice. The doctors and my parents thought it was best for me to realize and understand my mother's choice on my own. They said I had already been failed by so many adults in my life who were supposed to protect me, and they didn't want to add to that list. My adoptive dad also mentioned wanting me to be able to enjoy at least part of my childhood without a revelation like that hanging over my head. Looking back on it all, I really appreciate that. I don't remember much of my childhood up until I was placed in my adoptive parents' custody, and what I can remember isn't great, but the childhood they gave me made up for that in spades. I know the choices my adoptive parents made for me were made with my best interest in mind. I love them, and I know everything they did was out of love for me too. I feel like people misinterpreted what I was saying in my last post about my feelings toward them, so I just wanted to clarify that part. Regarding my mother, I essentially told her that I wasn't interested in speaking again, given everything I know now. I don't know how she took it because I've since blocked her number. My parents have agreed to reiterate that message from me if she contacts them, but I don't think she will. I'm never reaching out to her again. I can't do it. I think part of me is always going to wonder why she did the things she did. But based on all the answers she's given to my questions so far, I'm not sure her honesty would be very helpful to me in the long run. Thank you for your words of encouragement and kindness. I really needed them in that moment, and I truly appreciate you all for it. Proud of you. I'm glad everything worked out. Keep your mom out of your life. Finally, we have a post where the kid's treating the adoptive parents with love and respect. I didn't read your first post until I saw this edit. I look at my precious 2-year-old and I really can't understand what parents wouldn't get rid of people who would hurt their precious one. I held my little one as a potato, saw him take his first steps, watch him develop and grow. My heart hurt earlier today when my toddler hit me unintentionally in the mouth and I yelped loudly in pain and saw his little lip quiver as he started to cry. I held him so tightly because even though he hurt me, he felt it more. I would get rid of anyone who hurt my son. I'd have to fight off any murderous rage. Your birth mom failed you massively. I'm glad you've got your adoptive family. Last story. Am I the a-hole for laughing when my mom said she'd hope I would care for my stepdad in his old age? For some context, my mom broke up our family when I was 6 and my brother was 11 to be with my stepdad. Our dad moved to a neighboring state, and we only got to see him every other weekend. I've only connected all these details as an adult. My brother and I are now both in our 30s, and my dad didn't share details of the divorce until the last few years. To say I lost a lot of respect for my mom and stepdad is an understatement. My mom chose to replace our dad with an angry alcoholic and thought we'd make a big, happy family. Hint, it never happened. I forgive them, it was years ago, but the respect is gone. Growing up with them was stressful and like walking on eggshells. If I had a disagreement with my stepdad, my mom would come home and only talk to him about what happened before giving me a punishment. The day my brother graduated high school, he moved out. We both had nothing but disdain for my stepdad. He got drunk every single day and was mean. Not physically, but verbally. I'll never forget being called a whore for going on a date with my boyfriend or the time we followed a young woman to her home after she flipped us off on the road. After I became an adult and got married at a young age, our relationship improved. I've now been married for almost 13 years, and we have 2 little girls together. When my stepdad comes to our house, we get along great. When we went back to their home for Thanksgiving a few years ago, it was very stressful. Many parts of me felt like I was stepping back into high school again. Fast forward to a conversation I had with my mom recently. We were discussing children taking in their parents in their old age. Something I might add, my mom never did for my grandma after my grandpa died. Why? Because my stepdad couldn't live with her. None of her other 3 kids took her in either, and she managed okay, passing away in her own home with my mom and aunts at her side. Anyhow, we were discussing this subject and how many parents might be taken in by their children after their spouses pass away. For example, my mom coming to stay with us after my stepdad passes away, my mother-in-law, or my dad, etc. She said she hopes that if she passed away, I would consider taking my stepdad in if he were elderly. I actually laughed out loud before even considering how my reaction might hurt her feelings. First of all, even if it were my own dad, I would prefer to take in one of our moms if I'm going to be a primary caregiver. And of course, if we never actually took anyone into our home, we would still help and support them however we could. But my mom expecting this of me with my stepdad? What magical land is this where irony doesn't exist? I have never considered him a father figure. He played a huge role in breaking apart my family at a young age and refused to take in my terminally ill grandma when she needed it most. So am I the a-hole for laughing? How did she react? And how did she not know this man made your lives miserable under her roof? Her eyes widened in shock. I immediately said, "Sorry, didn't mean to laugh that loud, but we basically already called dibs on my mother-in-law." She changed the subject, thank God. And she knew we all hated each other. She dated him for 5 years before marrying him, and she had plenty of chances to prioritize her kids, but she never did. If she prioritized her kids, she would have honored her original vows to my dad. OP, I think you need to take a serious look at your relationship with your mom. You say the relationships have gotten better after you moved out and got married. Isn't that because they can no longer control you the way they did when you were a child? Your mom clearly still does not respect you, and she won't even acknowledge the abuse they both perpetrated. They're better when they come to you, but when you got to their house, where they feel in control, they become abusive again. Why do you want your children to have a relationship with 2 abusers and 1 alcoholic? I strongly suggest getting some counseling to unpack your feelings about this. You say you forgave them, but did you really acknowledge your own feelings and hurts? Or did you just bury it all for the sake of keeping the peace? Forgiveness is not reconciliation. Do you have a daughter? What will you do when he calls her a whore? My mom and stepdad are not on the list of people who are allowed to watch our children, which frankly is a small opportunity because they don't live in our state. They've offered a few times to let my husband and me take a weekend trip, and we have declined. They also know that my husband's brother and sister-in-law are our kids' godparents. We also don't visit their house anymore because of the Thanksgiving experience. So far, it's working out, and they don't mind coming here. Generally, they're on their best behavior because other families always around with us. I might seek a counselor because, besides venting to my husband, I really don't know how to come to terms with how I feel about them after learning the whole truth about their relationship. I often think if my mom makes the wrong comment or pushes me too far one day, I might unload on her. No, you're not the a-hole. Given your history with him and your mom's request, it's